I won the biggest official Pokemon tournament of all time with a Pokemon that everyone thought was awful. This is Screamtail. It's the ancient form of Jigglypuff and one of 14 Paradox Pokemon that recently became legal in the newest competitive Pokemon rule set. Now, when it came to these Paradox Pokemon, the consensus was that these 4 were great, these 3 had potential, this one was gimmicky but threatening, and the rest were garbage. Screamtail has 65 base attack and special attack. For context, that's as much attack as Slowpoke and as much special attack as Psyduck. On the plus side, Screamtail has amazing bulk and incredible speed. Plus, it gets some of the best supporting moves in the game, such as Reflect, Light Screen, Trick Room, Encore, Disable, the list goes on. The reason I use Screamtail has to do with a move that it has that very, very few Pokemon learn: Perish Song. Perish Song doesn't do damage like a regular attacking move. Instead, it applies a counter to every Pokemon on the field, starting at 3 and at the end of every turn falling by 1. When the counter hits 0, the Pokemon faints. Now, that might sound broken, but all you need to do to get rid of this counter is just switch your Pokemon out. Because there's such simple counterplay, and because so few Pokemon actually learn Perish Song, it's almost never seen competitively. Almost. There is one contentious strategy. All you need to do is pair Pokemon that learn Perish Song with a Pokemon with the ability Shadow Tag, which prevents your opponents from switching out. This probably sounds like a really simple strategy, but trust me, it is a lot more complex than it initially seems. The thing is, it's really difficult to win a battle without attacking your opponent, and with this Perish Trap strategy, you're almost never attacking. Also, Ghost-type Pokemon are immune to Shadow Tag, and moves like U-Turn and Volt Switch still work as normal and can switch your Pokemon out. Before we talk more about how I made this super unorthodox strategy work, we first have to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Displate. Displate is a company that displays art printed directly on metal. It's a really unique way of showcasing the things that you're passionate about, and it's a totally distinctive look. I ordered this mushroom displate and this national parks one to hang up in my apartment. Displate is really cool because they have both branded and artistic designs, meaning they have incredible artwork as well as many designs inspired by your favorite series, including lots of anime and movies. Getting them on a wall is no problem thanks to their easy to use mounting system, which I like personally because it uses a magnet, which I don't know, I just think is cool. Displates typically arrive 4 to 5 business days after you order, so if you find one you really love, you won't have to wait a long time to display it. When I was looking for displates that I wanted, I got totally lost on the site. There's just so many incredible designs to choose from. If you find one that you really love, you can use my link in the description to receive a discount. Ordering a displate helps support the channel, so I'd appreciate if you check them out. Perish Trap is pretty widely considered to be the single hardest strategy to use in competitive Pokemon. It's so difficult, in fact, that it has only ever won one official Pokemon tournament.
My Lodex Perish count falls to 0, and WolfeyVGC is crowned your regional champion.
Yep, by me. Perish Trap is my single favorite strategy. I've been using it since the best Perish Song user was Mismagius, and the only Shadow Tag Pokemon was Wobbuffet. I fell in love with this strategy in 2012, and I've brought Perish Song to an official tournament every single year from 2014 to 2019. The only reason that I didn't bring it to a tournament during Sword and Shield was because tournaments were shut down for most of the game's lifespan. Nevertheless, bringing only Perish Song to a tournament is very different than bringing a dedicated Perish Trap team. The only time I did that was in 2015, and even though I did win the tournament, I never attempted to do it again. Not only is it an extremely difficult strategy with way less margin for error than almost any other team, you also need very specific team building tools to even make it work in the first place. There have only been 3 Pokemon ever that can legally get Shadow Tag. Wobbuffet, who doesn't work because it can't learn Protect, which is a crucial part of the strategy. Mega Gengar, who was great because it got both Shadow Tag and Perish Song, but is not in Generation 9. And Gothitelle. Gothitelle is a good Pokemon, which is good because it's also the only way to make this strategy work. For Perish Song, prior to the Paradox Pokemon, these were the only Pokemon that could even learn it in Scarlet and Violet, and of them, I would consider only these to be even possible to use. Now, originally, I wasn't planning on bringing Perish Trap to this tournament, but that changed after I talked with my friends. I work closely with other pro players for these tournaments, and oftentimes we'll end up using the same teams. In San Diego, the first official tournament of Scarlet and Violet, a bunch of my friends and I all used the same team that we'd built together, but on the whole, they did a little bit worse than they were hoping. So for this tournament, we all agreed. No matter what happened, we would all work on and use our own individual teams in order to hone our individual skills. And so I decided that for this tournament, I wanted to win with my favorites. Every good Perish Trap team has three main components: Pokemon that use Perish Song, Pokemon that have Shadow Tag, and Pokemon that support. Let's start with the Perish Song users first. If you recall, Ghost-type Pokemon are immune to Shadow Tag, meaning I couldn't trap them on the field with Gothitelle. I needed to have other ways of dealing with them, and since Ghost-type Pokemon are weak to Ghost-type attacks, Flutter Mane worked phenomenally. It's a Ghost and Fairy-type Pokemon with incredible special attack, special defense, and speed, but it's balanced by its abysmal physical defense and HP stats. Flutter Mane was my offensive Perish Song user. I maxed out its speed and special attack stats and gave it a Focus Sash to help keep it alive. For its other moves, I went with Moonblast and Shadow Ball because they were the strongest options it has available. When using a Perish Trap team, taking KOs is a very valuable tool because if you knock out both Pokemon on your opponent's side of the field, you won't even need to worry about Shadow Tag to keep the opponent trapped because they won't be able to switch out due to not having anything to switch into. Lastly, on a team centered around Perish Song, every single Pokemon should have Protect to be able to stall as the Perish counter drops. Most Flutter Mane chose an offensive Terra type like Ghost or Fairy, or a defensive one like Fire or Steel. I didn't have that many good ways of getting a Moongus off the field quickly, so I went with Terra Grass. I wanted multiple Pokemon immune to Spore and Rage Powder, so that even if I couldn't get a Moongus off the field quickly, it at least wouldn't be able to put my team to sleep. I just want to take a quick second and ask you to subscribe. We are so close to 1 million subscribers, so if you don't mind, I'd appreciate you just double checking to make sure you're subscribed, even if you think you already are. Next, Screamtail, the MVP of this team. Booster Energy is an item that activates the abilities of the Paradox Pokemon. These two abilities, named Quark Drive and Photosynthesis, both do the same thing. They raise the Pokemon's highest stat when activated. For most stats, the boost is 30%, but for whatever reason, if the stat instead it boosts is speed, that boost is 50%. In other words, using Booster Energy to boost your speed gives you the most stat points possible, and speed is exactly what I needed. I gave my Screamtail enough investment to outspeed Choice Scarf Annihilate, which also meant I was way faster than any Pokemon that hadn't boosted its speed. I still had a ton of stats left over, so I decided to max out its HP. Then I invested enough in its defense to allow it to survive Adamant Life Orb Max Attack King Gambit Ironhead, which is a very powerful, super effective attack. Many players would probably just put the remaining points in its special defense, but not me. Remember earlier how I said that Flutter Mane has abysmal physical defense? Well, it's so bad that despite Screamtail's horrible physical attack stat, it's still able to two-shot Flutter Mane if you give it a little bit of investment with Play Rough. This has the added benefit of allowing Screamtail to KO even bulky Roaring Moon, which was a big deal throughout the tournament. Finally, I put the remaining points in Screamtail's special defense to give it a little bit more staying power. For moves, I knew I wanted Protect, Perish Song, and Play Rough, but there were so many options for the final move slot. My first idea was Sing, which is a very evil move, but I thought it could work here. Screamtail's so bulky that it tends to sit in the field for a long time, and buying yourself a single extra turn with Sleep can be a big deal when playing Perish Trap. But I knew that if I ran Sing, I would inevitably end up in a position where I needed to click it to win the game, and I didn't want my tournament to come down to dumb luck. My next idea was Encore, but Encore is mostly used to lock opponents into defensive moves like Protect, and since my team isn't exerting any offensive pressure, I wasn't sure how often this would come up. But then I thought about Encore's partner in crime, Disable. You often just need to survive for a single turn when using Perish Trap because you can Protect on the first and third turns and then switch out on the last one. On top of that, many Pokemon were only carrying one attack that could damage my super bulky Pokemon, especially when considering Terastallization. If you disable a Pokemon's best way to do damage, it's going to be much harder to remove my bulky Pokemon from the field. Even better, any Pokemon holding a choice item would suddenly find themselves at a massive disadvantage against Screamtail because if I disable their attack, they're going to be forced to use Struggle. Finally, because I wanted Screamtail to be as bulky as possible, I gave it Terra Steel. This resists Steel and is immune to Poison, which are two of Screamtail's 3 weaknesses, and Steel is also just, again, the best defensive type in the game. Next, as the premier and only Shadow Tag user in the game, Gothitelle was added to the team. Gothitelle received a major buff in Generation 8 when it was given Fake Out. Since Dynamax Pokemon are immune to Fake Out, this didn't really feel like a big deal at the time, but now that Dynamax is gone, we can see this buff for what it truly is. Let's say I have Screamtail and Arcanine on the field. If I switch in Gothitelle and use Perish Song, the Perish counter falls to 3. I can now use Fake Out with Gothitelle on whatever Pokemon's more threatening and do whatever I want with Screamtail as the counter falls to 2. I can then protect both of my Pokemon as the counter falls to 1. And then on the final turn of Perish, I can switch out before I faint. Fake Out basically allows Gothitelle to use Pseudo Protect for 1 turn, and on Perish Trap, that 1 turn is a massive deal. So I knew I wanted to protect Fake Out and Psychic since I knew I wanted a damaging move somewhere on there. But I was once again stuck on the last move slot. I used Trick Room for a while, but I didn't really have good tools to make use of it. In the end, I went with Heal Pulse. I don't love Heal Pulse in general, but on a team like this, where the main and only goal is kind of just to stay alive, it ended up being absolutely the right choice. I maxed out Gothitelle's HP, gave it enough defense to survive Kowtow Cleave, and put the rest of its stats in special defense. I wanted to use an item that would keep Gothitelle alive, so I gave it a Citrus Berry because it's the most consistent one. Just like with Screamtail, I went with Terra Steel because it's the best defensive type. Let's talk about Arcanine. Arcanine is kind of a no-brainer on this team because of 2 reasons. First, Intimidate is very valuable on a team where you want all your Pokemon to stay alive. Second, Goldengo. I hate this Pokemon. Goldengo is a Ghost-type Pokemon, which is already a problem for Perish Trap. Its ability, Good as Gold, is so stupid. It makes it immune to all status moves. Now, Goldengo isn't immune to Haze, which, as far as I was aware, affected Pokemon in the exact same way that Perish Song did. It works through Protect, it works through Substitute, etc. The thing is, Goldengo is not immune to Haze, which is great because it can be used to reset its stat drops, but it is immune to Perish Song. That means that unlike other Ghost-type Pokemon, you cannot beat Goldengo by taking 2 KOs and then forcing it to hear the song. The only way my team was going to be able to beat Goldengo is by knocking it out the old-fashioned way, which is a problem because my whole team was focused around defense. While most Arcanine, including the one I ran 8 years ago, are typically trained to be super defensive, I decided to go a different route this time. The most important thing for my Arcanine to do was to KO every single Goldengo it came across. So I trained my Arcanine to be super fast, outspeeding all Goldengo and all Great Tusk, and maxed out its attack stat. For its moves, I chose Protect, Flare Blitz, Will-O-Wisp, and Extreme Speed. Protect and Flare Blitz are obvious, but Extreme Speed was used because I didn't have any good ways of naturally controlling the speed of the battle. The last move slot was between Will-O-Wisp or Snarl, and I went with Will-O-Wisp because even though Snarl is a good attack, Will-O-Wisp has higher impact, and my team was trained to be specially bulky across the board. For its item, I chose Safety Goggles to make it a reliable check against Amoonguss and Brute Bonnet, who happened to pick up in usage right before the tournament. I initially had a Terra type of Normal to boost Extreme Speed's damage output, but I switched to Water after much testing. I wanted a Terra type that could both resist Goldengo's Make It Rain and Iron Bundle's Hydro Pump. Amoonguss is an incredibly bulky support Pokemon that excels at slowing your opponents down and keeping your team alive. Amoonguss used a standard moveset of Protect, Rage Powder, Spore, and Pollen Puff. Spore puts opponents to sleep, Rage Powder forces your opponents to target Amoonguss even if they really want to get rid of its partner, and Pollen Puff could be used for a little bit of damage or to heal its partners up by 50%. Amoonguss's ability Regenerator was also super nice and one of the main reasons I used it over Brute Bonnet. I trained Amoonguss fully in its bulk, but to be honest, I don't remember specifically what I calculated for, so I can't tell you what this specific EV spread does. All I knew was that it felt like I was normally surviving the things that I felt like I should be surviving, which was good enough for me. I initially used Terra Water, but being weak to Freeze Dry even after terastallizing felt really bad. Eventually, I settled on Dark. It's a really solid type without many weaknesses, and resisting Ghost and Psychic type attacks was a really big deal. For the item, I initially had Rocky Helmet and then switched to a berry that restored HP, but neither of them felt very impactful. But then I tried Mental Herb, and I knew that it was the right item for this Amoonguss. Lots of random Pokemon started running Taunt, and without Mental Herb, Amoonguss was super weak to them. With Mental Herb and a good defensive Terra, it was almost impossible to stop Amoonguss from disrupting an opponent's team. In the very first version of the team that I built, I had these 5 Pokemon plus Kingambit, because I figured there wasn't a better Pokemon at dealing with Ghost types. But Kingambit didn't really feel like it fit. It was clunky and awkward to use. After testing a bunch, I realized I had 2 main weaknesses, Kingambit and Torkoal. Kingambit did super effective damage against all 3 Perish Trap Pokemon, was stupidly bulky, got stronger when intimidated, and often used Terra Flying Terra Blast for Amoonguss. Torkoal did ridiculous damage with Terra Fire Eruption in Trick Room, and would often completely overwhelm my defense. Was there a Pokemon that could handle both of these behemoths? I really felt like I needed a hero. Very early on, I made the bold statement that Palafin was the best new Pokemon introduced in Scarlet and Violet. Except, people didn't really seem to agree. Nobody was using Palafin. So I put it at number 1 of the 10 most underrated Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. But it still wasn't very popular and was almost exclusively used on Rain teams. So I put my money where my mouth is and I gave it a shot. Not only did it help with Kingambit and Torkoal, it added a whole nother dimension to my team. It has incredible synergy with Arcanine and Amoonguss, and because it's so strong when it transforms, it can help me pick up some early KOs so I could win the game later with Perish Song. I trained Palafin to be as strong as possible, gave it enough speed to outspeed all Tyranitar and bulky Goldengo, and put the rest of its stats in its bulk. For its moves, I chose to drop 2 of its more common choices, Haze and Flip Turn. I wasn't worried about Dondozo, which is the main Pokemon you want to hit with Haze, and frankly, I think Flip Turn is really bad on Palafin. Instead, I ran Protect, Wave Crash, Jet Punch, and Close Combat. Wave Crash, when transformed, does enormous damage, Jet Punch is an incredible priority move, and Close Combat allows Palafin to threaten Tyranitar, Kingambit, and Iron Bundle even before it's transformed. Because Jet Punch is so strong for a priority move, I decided to use my remaining resources to make it even stronger. A Terra type of water and the held item Mystic Water allowed me to push Jet Punch as far as it could go. With this, Palafin could still contribute to a battle even while in its zero form. And with that, the team was complete. But now it was time to test. I hopped on the ladder and I played a bunch of games, but before I knew it, I was having trouble finding opponents. Without realizing it, I had become the number 1 player on Showdown. During my ascent, I'd come across several of the world's top players, and my team was so good and so unusual, they decided to copy it to a T. Using it on stream, they seemed to be having trouble getting it to work, especially because Screamtail didn't seem to make any sense. I thought I was in the clear, but I wasn't. They modified the team, dropping Screamtail for Iron Hands, and then entered and won a huge online tournament the week before Orlando Regionals. To make things worse, they then posted their version of the team online, which was just my team with Iron Hands over Screamtail. Most serious players began practicing against the team in earnest, oftentimes even modifying their own teams to maintain a better matchup. Several other players took this modified version and then modified it again, dropping Palafin for Iron Bundle. They then went off and laddered with this version and tested against their friends and shared the team in private circles, meaning that even more players had experience with and against a version of the team. Right before the tournament, I had totally lost my element of surprise. But I wasn't worried. Without Screamtail, the team played totally differently. And beyond that, I'm the best Perish Trap player in the world. I don't think anybody else alive can use this archetype the same way that I can. So even if my opponents had experience against the team, it wasn't the same as having experience against me. Before I knew it, it was time to leave for the airport. But something was bothering me. Torkoal. It had spiked in usage right before the tournament, and after testing further, I realized that even with Palafin, my matchup was not that good. So, on the way to the airport, I pulled out my Switch, spent 50 Terra Shards, and changed my Gothitel's Terra type from Steel to Water. Except something else was bothering me. I was having the worst back pain I've had in my entire life. I moved recently, and I threw my back out during the process. I couldn't move without pain, and getting through the airport took me 3 times as it normally would because if I tried to wear my backpack like a normal person, I thought I was going to pass out. When I made it onto the plane, I thought it was probably going to be the biggest thing I accomplished this weekend. Nevertheless, I made it to Orlando. My friends Aaron and Brendan helped me carry my bag to the hotel, and we spent the night doing final preparations before the big day. After a 2.5-hour delay on the day of the tournament, my first opponent was revealed to be Aaron Brock, a semi-finalist at the previous regional championship. Kingambit, Fluttermane, and Volcarona are all problems for my team. I lead with Palafin and Screamtail against my opponents Fluttermane and Volcarona. Knowing I can catch him off guard, I double Aaron's Fluttermane with Jet Punch and Play Rough, knocking it out on turn 1. Volcarona sets up a Quiver Dance, but the damage is done. I send out Gothitelle and click Perish Song, creating a clear path to victory. Now that I've shown my cards, game 2 is going to be an even bigger challenge. This time, Aaron leads with Flutter Mane and Amoonguss, preventing me from going for the same Jet Punch and Play Rough play that I did last game. Both Amoonguss play a huge role in this game, putting multiple Pokemon to sleep. Aaron brings Kingambit this time, but it sleeps for long enough for me to knock it out with Perish Song. In the end, my Screamtail wakes up after only one turn of sleep and I'm able to win the game. After such a tough draw round 1, I'm hoping for an easier round 2. So you can imagine my chagrin when I see that my next opponent is Kyle Morris, a player who's been playing almost as long as I have. Kyle leads with Roaring Moon and Iron Bundle against my Screamtail and Palafin. I know Roaring Moon's only here to stop Perish Song with Throat Chop, and I knew it a month ago when I gave my Screamtail enough EVs to OHKO it with Play Rough before it could. Being up a Pokemon when using Perish Trap is a huge advantage. This one turn essentially wins me the game. Game 2, Kyle brings his Roaring Moon in the back to avoid immediately dropping to Screamtail. I'm able to get 2 KOs with an early Perish Song, and by using Amoonguss in the mid game, I can end the game with a second Perish. My next opponent is yet another veteran player with another challenging team. Booster Energy Iron Moth is an extremely difficult Pokemon to beat. It outputs huge damage on its own, and it can set up for KOs with its partner by using Acid Spray. And it's faster than Booster Energy Screamtail, meaning I can't get cheeky with Disable. Of course, there's another way that I can catch it off guard. Terra Water Jet Punch on the first turn of game 1. Up a Pokemon, I Perish Song and win the game. I won't be able to use the same trick twice. My opponent leads with Iron Bundle and Sash Flutter Mane. This match is much closer, but I'm able to narrowly claw out another win. In order to advance to the final bracket, I'll need to win 8 of my 10 rounds today. Unfortunately, my next opponent is Chongjun Peng, a regional champion from last season. When I see Chongjun's team, I am once again overcome with a feeling of dread. Flutter Mane with Focus Sash that I can't trap in with Shadow Tag, Kingambit, Rage Powder, Terra Water Volcarona, who I can only remove with Perish Song, and Brute Bonnet, who not only can put my Pokemon to sleep, but also threatens huge damage. I lead with Palafin and Flutter Mane into my opponents Volcarona and Flutter Mane. I need to get rid of their Flutter Mane if I'm gonna win with Perish Song, so I attack it with both my Pokemon. Volcarona switches out, making my play great, but I lose a speed tie, causing my Flutter Mane's health to drop really low. On the plus side, I do end up KOing their Flutter Mane. Brute Bonnet and Kingambit are on the field now. I realize if I take one of them this turn, I win the game, so I decide to make a really aggressive play, doubling into Kingambit with Close Combat and Moonblast. But Chongjun reads this and terastallizes his Kingambit to Fairy, causing me to do no damage. I could have gone for a completely safe play of Perish Song and Protect, but I missed it, and suddenly I'm really on the back foot. Chongjun doubles into Palafin, taking it out. I go into Amoonguss, but I miss another safe play. Protect and Spore has no drawback, but I don't know, maybe the impatience got the better of me. I go for Moonblast on Brute Bonnet, which backfires because I lose my Flutter Mane to Sucker Punch. All I'm left with is Screamtail, who just doesn't have the offense to win this game. It's my first loss of the day. The good news is, it wasn't really my team's fault. I had a lead, but I threw it away. Game 2 opens up better, with our Flutter Manes trading Shadow Balls as Kingambit falls asleep. Perish Song goes up and Kingambit switches out. I knock out my opponent's Flutter Mane and put the incoming Volcarona to sleep. I go for another Perish Song and try to switch in Screamtail, but the Kingambit wakes up after just one turn of sleep and does huge damage to it. I need to get Gothitelle in, so I go for the double switch, but Volcarona also gets a one-turn sleep and does big damage to Gothitelle. Amoonguss loses half its health to Kowtow Cleave, and I'm once again struggling to keep afloat. For the first time all set though, Perish Trap is up, and there's only 2 turns left on the counter. I sacrifice Flutter Mane to safely stall a turn, and then go for a double Protect to secure the double knockout. With only Brute Bonnet left, I easily take it out and bring us to a game 3. I go with Palafin and Amoonguss this time, and Chongjun goes back to his lead from game 1. This Volcarona is a problem, so I go for a risky turn 1 play. Terra Dark Amoonguss and attack into the Flutter Mane. Chongjun makes a great play, protecting both of his Pokemon. Now I've burned my Terra and Amoonguss is suddenly weak to Flutter Mane's Moonblast. I'm able to switch Palafin into Arcanine for free, but Chongjun goes for Terra Water on his Volcarona. It's gonna be incredibly hard for me to get rid of now. Chongjun doubles my Amoonguss, knocking it out, but thanks to a burn from Flare Blitz, I keep the Pokemon count tied at 3-3. I expect Chongjun to protect his Brute Bonnet and switch into Kingambit since Volcarona and Bonnet are powerless in front of Safety Goggles Arcanine, but Chongjun misreads the team sheet and uses Spore into Arcanine. This mistake ruins my Flare Blitz read into Volcarona. If I just attacked Brute Bonnet, I'd be in a good position, but I had gone for what I thought was the most sensible play. After this, Chongjin makes the play I expected last turn. I once again get the turn wrong as I double into Brute Bonnet as it protects. Finally, I get a read right. I predict Brute Bonnet to switch out now, and I see a path to victory. If I double into Kingambit and KO it, Chongjin will be down to his last 2 Pokemon, and I can use Perish Song and switch out my Arcanine to secure a win. Unfortunately, Play Rough does way less than I expected, and Kingambit survives the Flare Blitz. I no longer have any way of getting rid of Terra Water Volcarona, and I lose the set. I'm disappointed. I feel like I could have won if I just hadn't played so recklessly. Losing winnable games is not something you can afford in a Pokemon tournament. But one of the skills that any good Pokemon player has is being able to shake off a loss. For round 5, I have a similar matchup to my last round. However, I learned from my mistakes and take the set in only 2 games. The lack of Brute Bonnet definitely made things a bit easier, as did taking a surprise KO with Baby Palafin. My next opponent had a very strange team. Amoonguss, Kingambit, Gothitelle are all standard Pokemon, but Rotom Wash, Salamence, and Slitherwing? I didn't have a single practice game against anything like this. Because my opponent has Gothitelle, I need to be very careful when setting up Perish Song. If I'm not, I can easily end up being trapped myself. Game 1 opens up with my opponent's Kingambit and Gothitelle into my Fluttermane and Gothitelle. I go for an early Perish Song even though I can't trap the Gothitelle and take out Kingambit after a couple turns. In the mid game, Rotom Wash and Slitherwing are on the field and I'm able to once again trap them in and go for Perish Song. For game 2, I overpredict on the second turn, giving my opponent a chance to knock out my Gothitelle, destroying my central strategy. I do my best to stay in the game and manage to set up what could be a game-winning Perish Song, but my opponent knocks out both of my Pokemon on the field. It's a 1 against 2, and my Amoonguss has to survive for the next few turns. Somehow, it hangs on for dear life and I win the set. It's time for the 7th round, and I have a matchup that looks like it should be simpler. My opponent leads with Lycanroc and Tyranitar. Normally, I consider this favorable, but I neglected to realize that Lycanroc is Terra Ghost. Because I can only trap 1 Pokemon with Perish Song, I lose the damage trade and find myself without enough resources to win the game. I'm surprised to see Sylveon and Arcanine as the last 2 Pokemon. Without Gastrodon, my opponent had no way of stopping Palafin. I lose the game, but this information gives me an idea. Win game 2 without Palafin, showing again that I really don't intend to bring it to the set, and then for game 3, I will bring it and secure an easy victory when my opponent leaves behind their Gastrodon. Game 2 starts and I immediately take way too much damage. I'm forced to give up both Gothitelle and Screamtail in exchange for Lycanroc and Tyranitar. I only have Arcanine and Amoonguss left, and my opponent has Arcanine and Roaring Moon. It's a 2 against 2 that I assumed I was going to lose, but because I saved my Terastallization, I'm just barely able to win. My opponent once again left Gastrodon behind as I left behind Palafin. It's time to play my ace. Lycanroc Tyranitar are now faced with their worst nightmare. I'm tempted to try and KO Lycanroc with Extreme Speed and Jet Punch, but something stops me. I remember how, in my set versus Chongjin, I left Palafin in Zero form for way too long. Palafin is so good here, I should probably just switch it out early to make sure that it's in Hero form the entire game. My opponent also goes for a switch, and would you look at that? Gastrodon hits the field. My Pokemon are slowly getting chipped down by Lycanroc and the Sandstorm damage, and I can't get rid of this Gastrodon for the life of me. I've got to make a play. Gastrodon is around 80% health next to Lycanroc against my Palafin and Screamtail. I need Play Rough in close combat to KO the Gastrodon or I'll never win. Lycanroc goes for Rock Slide. Neither of my Pokemon flinch. Play Rough drops Gastrodon to around half, and Close Combat picks up the KO. With Gastrodon down, there's nothing stopping Palafin now. I take the set. Being one of the last games to finish, I had no time to rest between sets. And of course, my next opponent has one of the hardest matchups I've had all day. It's a Perish Trap Mirror. These matches took forever, and I don't remember that many details. The opponent's Gothitelle is faster and has leftovers and taunt, making it extremely good at shutting down my Gothitelle. I bring Gothitelle all 3 games, but because of taunt and being slower, it isn't really able to do that much. I can't get rid of Fluttermane quickly enough, and its damage output is overwhelming, costing me the game. I'm narrowly able to win game 2, using my own Fluttermane to break through enough of my opponent's defense. But game 3 doesn't go so well. I gamble on a Flutter Mane speed tie, and I lose. And my opponent adjusts and brings in Iron Hands once my Flutter Mane goes down. I can't deal enough damage, having already lost Flutter Mane, and I lose. If I don't win both of my final sets, I'll be eliminated from the tournament. My 9th opponent has a number of major threats to my team. In game 1, I face off against King Gambit and Iron Hands. I think my position is decent, so I go for Perish Song and bring in Gothitelle. Iron Hands has Swords Dance. I'm able to KO the front 2 Pokemon, but they do so much damage in the process that it costs me the game. If I lose either of the next 2 games, my run is over. I need to pull it together. I start with Gothitelle and Screamtail, allowing me to immediately punish their non-Flutter Mane lead. With this adjustment, I cleanly execute my game plan, and I win game 2. But this makes Screamtail and Gothitelle a very risky lead for game 3, since if my opponent leads Flutter Mane, I'm immediately on the back foot. I can't risk it. I need to find a different strategy. Iron Hands and King Gambit are the lead once again. I lead with Palafin this time. The momentum of the game goes back and forth, but in the end, what will determine who wins is left to whether or not I get a read correct. I get it right, and I barely win the set. Only 1 round remains. The final team of the day looks like if somebody had tried their hardest to build the absolute worst matchup for my team. I pray that my opponent doesn't see what I see. A Mousehold and Goldango lead invalidates my entire team. Guess what? They lead with Mousehold and Goldango. The only way to win this is to play out of my absolute mind. So I do. I double attack the Mousehold as Goldango protects. With Goldango in a vulnerable position next turn, I dish out enough damage so that I can deal with it later. Once that's through, I Perish Song and miraculously, I win. But that's just game 1. For game 2, my opponent sticks with Mousehold and Goldango, and I see an opportunity. Using Shadow Ball in front of Follow Me Mousehold is just so risky, but I need to take risks if I want to win. Mousehold protects, and I double into Goldango with Shadow Ball and Terra Water Wave Crash. Realizing I need to push this advantage, I KO the Mousehold and finish the game with Perish Song. I win the set and advance to the final bracket. By the time I'm allowed to leave the venue, it's 11:30 p.m. I've been in this convention center for 16 hours, and I need to be back tomorrow morning in less than 8 hours. My friends Brendan Zhang and Justin Karras also made it to the final day, and Aaron Traylor was just 1 win short. A single set lost at this point eliminates you from the tournament, which is a problem because my next opponent has the team of my first loss today. The Flutter Mane, Volcarona, Kingambit team used by Chongjun. I mulled it over as I tried to fall asleep, thinking about what I could do differently. When I woke up the next day, I had a plan. I couldn't trap both Flutter Mane and Volcarona on the field at the same time because Flutter Mane's a ghost type. But I can't win the game unless I get rid of this Terra Water Volcarona. I realized that if I took out Volcarona with Perish, I could probably win the game with Palafin and Arcanine later on. I thought for sure that my opponent would lead with Flutter Mane and Volcarona as Chongjun did in games 1 and 3 against me. I was very surprised to see Kingambit and Volcarona be the lead. Wishing I'd led with Gothitelle, I switch in and Perish Song, but Flutter Mane switches in for Kingambit. This is still fine though, as once Volcarona goes down, I can probably win with what I have left. Volcarona goes down, and as I suspected, the combination of Palafin and Arcanine are able to win the game. For game 2, I decide to switch it up. If my opponent leads with the same Pokemon again, I can win the game immediately by leading with Gothitelle. Unfortunately, they don't lead the same. This time, it's Volcarona and Flutter Mane, what I expected for game 1. I set up Perish Song, and then damage Flutter Mane with Psychic and Play Rough, dropping it very low. Even though I only KO 1 Pokemon with the Perish Song, I'm still making progress. My opponent ends up trapped in the mid game with Kingambit and Brute Bonnet on the field against my Perish trapped Pokemon. Unfortunately, these two are really hard to slow down. I'm forced to sacrifice Flutter Mane to get Perish Song up, and then sacrifice Arcanine and allow Screamtail to fall asleep. I KO both Bonnet and Kingambit, but my opponent still has the low HP Flutter Mane that can KO both my remaining Pokemon. Should I protect Gothitelle and try and give Screamtail a chance to wake up? Or will my opponent expect that? I attack with Gothitelle, and my opponent's Shadow Ball goes into Screamtail. Gothitelle's Psychic finishes off Flutter Mane, and I narrowly win the set. Only 16 players remain out of the initial 800. I feel really good about this win. I beat one of my only 2 losses from the previous day. But then I see my next matchup. It's a friend of my other loss from yesterday, and wouldn't you know it, they're running the exact same team. To have both of my losses from the previous day as rematches in the elimination bracket feels cosmically unjust. My Gothitelle is powerless against this faster taunt Gothitelle, so I need to leave it behind. In its place, I'll bring Palafin. I might be able to get a surprise KO, and even better, I exert a fair bit of pressure against the Flutter Mane and Gothitelle lead that I expect. Unfortunately for me, the lead is Gothitelle and Amoonguss. This is the worst possible lead for Palafin. I decide to be aggressive, double attacking into Gothitelle turn 1, but it protects, and Palafin is put to sleep. I protect Flutter Mane as Amoonguss tries to spore it, and Gothitelle uses Psychic against Palafin, doing just under 50%. I go for Terra Grass on my Flutter Mane and land a Shadow Ball crit on the Gothitelle. Even better, Palafin lands up and uses Close Combat on Gothitelle, though it barely survives. Amoonguss fails Spore into Flutter Mane, and Palafin just barely survives another Psychic. My opponent switches Gothitelle into Flutter Mane, but I go for Wave Crash, bringing it down to Focus Sash and knocking myself out. I send out Arcanine, and Moonblast his Flutter Mane, which protects as I try to KO Amoonguss with Flare Blitz, but it switches into Gothitelle as a sacrifice. Iron Bundle hits the field, and I have a choice to make. Will he go for Hydro Pump into Arcanine? It's an obvious play, but the Protect is equally obvious. I call that it won't, and I go Protect and Flare Blitz as he doubles up into Flutter Mane. With Arcanine taking out my opponent's Flutter Mane, I can now win the game with my Amoonguss and Arcanine. Game 2, I switch up my leads, going for Flutter Mane and Amoonguss into my opponent's Flutter Mane and Gothitelle. I put Gothitelle to sleep early as my opponent brings in their Amoonguss, but my opponent predicts me to Terra and Pollen Puffs my Flutter Mane. I don't take the bait, and I Shadow Ball the Gothitelle, doing over half while not Terastallizing. Next turn, I Terastallize and finish off Gothitelle as my opponent spores, which I block this time. For the first time in both sets against this team, I actually have the lead. I'm not going to let it get away, and I use my remaining resources to win the game and the set. I've now beaten both of the teams that I lost to the day prior, and I'm one of only 8 players remaining in the entire tournament. My next opponent is Emilio Forbes, the only player yet to lose a single set all tournament. In terms of the team, it's got a lot of the same Pokemon I've been dealing with all tournament, namely Flutter Mane and King Gambit. I lead with Palafin and Screamtail against my opponents King Gambit and Flutter Mane. The entire weekend I've been feigning defense behind this lead while taking KOs by attacking aggressively. I have no reason to think that it won't work here. I double attack the Flutter Mane. Emilio protects, and I lose most of Screamtail's HP, doing no damage in the process. It was the worst possible turn 1. Emilio switching out the Flutter Mane is obvious. He doesn't want it to feint to my double up, but my Gothitelle switch in is equally obvious. If I switch to Gothitelle now and he calls it, I won't be able to win. So I make another aggressive play, doubling the Flutter Mane again, and it switches to Iron Bundle. Screamtail survives a Sucker Punch, but things are looking bleak as I basically waste both of my attacks for a second turn in a row. I know that the switch into Gothitelle is obvious, and it's also obvious I want to bring Palafin out. So I take the long route, switching Screamtail out and protecting Palafin. I call this turn right, finally, and I get Gothitelle in safely, but I have no way of setting Perish Song up, and no way of pressuring my opponent. I switch Palafin into Screamtail, intending to sacrifice it, but Emilio protects Iron Bundle, fearing close combat. Fake Out stops King Gambit from moving. With such low HP though, there's nothing stopping Icy Wind and Assurance from clearing both of my Pokemon. So I protect Gothitelle and try and sacrifice Screamtail, but Emilio predicts my Terra Water and doubles into Gothitelle. Somehow, despite being so low HP, Screamtail makes it through the turn, and finally sets up Perish Song. If I can make it through the next few turns, I'll be back in this game. I switch Screamtail into Amoonguss and Terastallize Gothitelle, calling that Emilio will go for Icy Wind this time instead of Freeze Dry. And thanks to my new water type, Gothitelle lives the Assurance. I use Psychic to take out Iron Bundle. It would have fainted in a few turns anyway, but I want to either find out what Emilio's last Pokemon is, or force his Flutter Mane to take some Life Orb recoil, in case it's a roll to survive Jet Punch. I protect both of my Pokemon, and the Perish counter falls to 1, but there's so much offense left on the field. I sacrifice both Screamtail and Gothitelle, and King Gambit faints to the Perish Song. The battle is now a 2 against 2. It all depends on what Emilio's last Pokemon is. It's Choice Specs Glamora. Jet Punch takes out Glamora, and Amoonguss survives the Shadow Ball. Emilio forfeits, and I win game 1. But the set isn't over. I need to win another game, and I'm a little less confident that I can do it, given that the game was looking pretty doomed until Emilio doubled my Gothitelle. I bring the same Pokemon for game 2. Emilio clearly knows I'm willing to attack with Palafin, and knowing that, I can switch it out easier. But Emilio switches his lead up, going with Glamora and Fluttermane. I protect both my Pokemon, intending to threaten the Disable next turn, but the Glamora was bait. It switches into Iron Bundle, making my Protect worthless. Now, whenever I had Palafin and Screamtail against Fluttermane last game, I attacked with both. So I figure there's almost no chance that Emilio lets me attack here, instead favoring Protect with Fluttermane. If Fluttermane's going to Protect, the best thing I can do is switch Palafin out, letting it transform for later. I know 3 of Emilio's 4 Pokemon, and 2 of them lose to transformed Palafin. Iron Bundle's one of the only ones that doesn't, so I figure, hey, maybe I'll just use Perish Song now so I can KO it so Palafin can win the game later. So, reading Fluttermane to Protect, I switch in Gothitelle and Perish Song. But Fluttermane doesn't Protect. It switches out, right into King Gambit, the other Pokemon capable of surviving Palafin. Gothitelle takes a tiny amount from Freeze Dry, but Perish Song goes up. If I can last 3 turns with Gothitelle alive, I can win. I fake out King Gambit and eat another Freeze Dry, as the Perish counter falls to 2. I protect with both, and the Perish counter falls to 1. I switch into Amoonguss who takes some damage, and sacrifice Gothitelle as both Iron Bundle and King Gambit fall. It's a 2 against 3, and I can bring in Screamtail, but I need to be careful. This Glamora is Terra Grass, and unlike last game, Terra is still on the table. I can't just Jet Punch it to take it out, nor can I redirect its attacks with Rage Powder. But Perish Song and Jet Punch are not my only option. I protect with both my Pokemon, and the Glamora locks into Earth Power. I Rage Powder away the taunt and disable Glamora's Choice Specs Earth Power. When a Pokemon holding a choice item is hit with Disable, its only remaining option is Struggle. I sacrifice Amoonguss to get Screamtail next to Palafin, putting myself in an unlosable situation. Jet Punch will always KO Fluttermane, and Disable will always force Glamora to struggle. It takes a few more turns, but the outcome is sealed. I win, becoming the first player to defeat Emilio, and I advance to the semi-finals. My next opponent is James Evans, the defending North American International Champion. There are some real problem Pokemon on this team, namely Gothitelle and Tyranitar. I lead with Fluttermane and Amoonguss. I go for Terradark with Amoonguss and Rage Powder as I Shadow Ball the Gothitelle, keeping my Fluttermane alive. James switches Gothitelle into Iron Bundle, but I Moonblast it, and I pick up the one-hit KO. This time I went for Spore into Tyranitar, and though my Fluttermane faints, I feel good. If Tyranitar falls asleep, momentum will be heavily in my favor. But Amoonguss flinches, and suddenly, my position looks very precarious. We both send out Gothitelle. James uses Fake Out to stop my Amoonguss from moving and does huge damage to Gothitelle with Crunch. And in exchange, I use Heal Pulse to bring Amoonguss back up. Unfortunately, the sand causes James's Gothitelle to eat a Recovery Berry, healing a ton of health. I bring in Screamtail as Tyranitar uses Crunch, lowering my defense. Gothitelle uses Taunt on Amoonguss, but Mental Herb keeps it safe, and Amoonguss finally puts Tyranitar to sleep. Gothitelle taunts Amoonguss again, and it sticks this time, but I double into the Gothitelle, knocking it out. James's final Pokemon is Great Tusk, capable of KOing all of my Pokemon. The only way I can win is to get Perish Song up and hope that I can outlast James's offense. I switch to Gothitelle and Perish Song, but James doesn't attack. He uses Substitute. It all comes down to if Tyranitar stays asleep. And it does. The Perish counter falls to 3. I protect. The Perish counter falls to 2. I switch. The Perish counter falls to 1. I protect. The Perish counter falls to 0, and I win game 1. One more win and I'm in the finals. James is forced to almost immediately switch out his Gothitelle in front of my Fluttermane and Terradark Amoonguss. Was he really going to lead it again for game 2? I thought not. Dragonite Tyranitar stare down Palafin and Fluttermane. Neither of James's Pokemon can switch out a Shadow Tag, so if James didn't bring his Gothitelle, I can get Perish Song up immediately. I switch in Gothitelle, but so does James. And though I get Perish Song off, Dragonite's Terra Blast KOs Fluttermane in one hit. I'm now down a Pokemon, and I need a hero. We trade Fake Outs, resulting in a dead turn as the Perish counter falls to 2. I decide to make a read. James is going to switch out his Gothitelle. Dragonite goes for an extreme speed. I hit the switched in Tyranitar and KO it, but the recoil drops Palafin super low, but not for long. Gothitelle's Heal Pulse heals Palafin for 50%. I switch Gothitelle out and protect, and though Dragonite does damage to Screamtail, the Perish Song takes it out. James's last Pokemon is Great Tusk. It goes down to a single Jet Punch, and Gothitelle falls shortly after. I'm in the finals. And here's where things get a little strange. I mentioned earlier that this is the second time that I've brought this dedicated Perish Trap strategy to an official tournament. And the person who I had to beat in the finals of the tournament in order to win was Ashton Cox. Ashton has a scary team. Gholdengo is a problem, Roaring Moon has Throat Chop, which can stop Perish Song, Brute Bonnet can put my team to sleep and do big damage, the Iron Hands has Volt Switch, which can get out of my trap, and of course, you never want to underestimate Dondozo. I decide to play without Gothitelle. It can't trap Gholdengo or Iron Hands, and Dondozo isn't able to switch once it combines anyway. Instead, I'll bring both Arcanine and Palafin to give myself multiple options to deal with this Gholdengo. I'll also bring Amoonguss for support and Screamtail so that I can win the game with Perish Song once I take 2 KOs. The battle starts, and Ashton leads off with Iron Hands and Gholdengo. Now, I do have a pretty free double protect here, but I worry. What if Ashton switches out his Iron Hands, reading my protect? I decide to make a very aggressive play, switching Palafin into Amoonguss and using Flare Blitz with Arcanine. Ashton makes the safe play of using Fake Out on Arcanine and Shadow Balls my incoming Amoonguss. Gholdengo's exposed, so I decide to double into it with Flare Blitz and Spore. Flare Blitz KOs Gholdengo, but Iron Hands' close combat takes out Arcanine in exchange. Ashton goes into Tatsugiri as I bring out Palafin. In front of Tatsugiri and Iron Hands, I can't really use Palafin, but I also need to keep Amoonguss' low health in mind. I predict Draco Meteor, switching Amoonguss out into Screamtail, nullifying the attack. Palafin blocks the Wild Charge with Protect. I switch Palafin into Amoonguss and go for Play Rough into Tatsugiri. Amoonguss dodges a Draco Meteor, and Iron Hands' Wild Charge doesn't even do a quarter of Screamtail's health. Play Rough finishes off Tatsugiri, and Iron Hands takes a bit from Pollen Puff. Ashton's final Pokemon is Roaring Moon. Screamtail KOs it with Play Rough, and Palafin takes out the Iron Hands on the next turn. I win game 1. I'm feeling confident going into game 2, but I need to be really careful. I don't think that Ashton brought the correct Pokemon, and I'm sure that he's going to realize that as well. But I feel good about the Pokemon that I brought, so I bring the same ones for game 2. Ashton, however, makes a big adjustment. Dondozo is led next to Gholdengo, and suddenly I have a very uncomfortable choice to make. If I try and Will-O-Wisp the Dondozo, I may lose my best counter to Gholdengo if Tatsugiri switches in and he Wave Crashes. But if Ashton attacks with Gholdengo and protects Dondozo, I could easily take a ton of damage. I decide to protect with both my Pokemon, trying to scout for a switch, but Ashton uses Substitute, getting it up for free. I switch to Screamtail and go for Terra Water, but Ashton switches Gholdengo to safety, wisely not switching in Tatsugiri, which would cause Dondozo to be unable to switch, but instead bringing in Iron Hands. Flare Blitz does a little under half to Iron Hands, and Dondozo's Wave Crash doesn't do that much to my Water-type Arcanine. And here's where I make a mistake. If I protect both my Pokemon and then go for Play Rough and Flare Blitz into the Iron Hands, I guarantee either a KO or Tatsugiri to hit the field, trapping Dondozo. Instead, I predict a Fake Out into Arcanine and I try to get fancy, going for Perish Song and switching into Amoonguss. I do get the Perish Song off, but Ashton goes for Volt Switch and can now bring in his Gholdengo. I'm completely out of position. Dondozo isn't trapped, and I don't have a good way of switching in a Pokemon that can handle Gholdengo. I predict Dondozo to switch out, and I Spore the incoming Tatsugiri, but Amoonguss takes a ton of damage in the process, and I'm no closer to handling this Gholdengo. I get Palafin in and protect Amoonguss, but Ashton brings in Iron Hands, and Palafin is threatened. I get Arcanine in, and I go for a Wave Crash, KOing the Iron Hands as it doesn't click Fake Out. But I have a new problem. Dondozo comes in, and this time, all my Pokemon are damaged, and I don't have Intimidate active. Ashton finally combines Dondozo, and I'm forced to make sacrifices. I reposition a little, and I'm forced to sacrifice Arcanine. It's the only way I don't immediately lose to Dondozo. I'll just have to figure something out for Gholdengo later. I'm so far behind. I need to take risks. If both my Pokemon make it through this turn, I may be able to stall at the Dondozo and use Pollen Puff to heal up Palafin. To my surprise, Screamtail is faster than Dondozo. If I realized this, I could have made a better play. The good news is I get Perish Song off. The bad news is Ashton uses Wave Crash instead of Earthquake and KOs Screamtail. With only Amoonguss and low HP Palafin left, I can't survive Dondozo's onslaught. It takes out my Palafin, and Amoonguss falls to my own Perish Song. The winner of the entire tournament will be whoever wins this final game. Having played it twice, the matchup feels like it should be in my favor. But Ashton played better than me. He made a complex game plan that I wasn't ready for, and he caught me off guard to win the game. I need to stop Dondozo from combining, and to do that, I really need to limit his switches. I need Gothitelle. If I leave Palafin behind, I'm bringing only one Pokemon that can even damage Gholdengo. If Arcanine faints before Gholdengo goes down, I will absolutely lose for sure. But it's a risk I have to take. I lead with Gothitelle and Arcanine. If Ashton leads with Gholdengo and Dondozo again, this will immediately force a switch in front of Fake Out and Flare Blitz, and it will stick the Dondozo with an Intimidate right away. But Ashton adjusts again, this time leading Tatsugiri and Iron Hands. I switch in Screamtail as Ashton goes for Fake Out and Muddy Water into my Gothitelle. But this position isn't awful. I go for Play Rough into Tatsugiri as Ashton uses Muddy Water again. Ashton uses Volt Switch, and he has a choice to make. If he goes into Dondozo and I went for Heal Pulse, he's gonna have a really hard time taking KOs before the Perish counter runs out. But if he goes into Gholdengo and I went for Psychic into Tatsugiri, he'll no longer be able to combine Dondozo with Tatsugiri. He chooses to go into Dondozo and gets the call right. I went for Psychic. I expect Ashton will go for Earthquake and Screamtail will survive. With this, I can protect both my Pokemon, then disable and Pollen Puff to heal up, switching out on the final turn to recover HP. The bad news is, Earthquake critical hits Screamtail, knocking it out. I now have dramatically fewer resources to stall out this Perish counter. I'm forced into Gothitelle and bring Arcanine in while protecting it with Fake Out. But here, I get stuck. Arcanine needs to be on the field when the Perish counter hits 0, or else Gholdengo will come in and do too much damage. But the Perish counter is at 2, not 1. If I switch Arcanine out, I won't be able to bring it in safely again, but if I stay in, I risk taking too much damage. I can Terrastalize, but then Iron Hands can KO me in one hit. I'm running out of time, so I switch to Amoonguss and Protect as the Perish counter falls to 1. But now there really is no way out. I can't protect Arcanine from everything. I run out of time to make my move, and make the move that won't immediately lose me the game. Switch Amoonguss back into Gothitelle and go for a double protect while Terrastalizing. I fail the double protect, but Arcanine survives the turn and Dondozo faints. Unfortunately, Iron Hands re-enters the field. If it uses Fake Out into my Arcanine and Draco Meteor into my Gothitelle, I don't think I have any chance of winning. If Ashton doesn't click Fake Out, if he's tempted to go for the KO on the Water-type Arcanine instead, I might be able to do this. Ashton doesn't go for Fake Out. I Fake Out the Iron Hands with my slower Gothitelle and Extreme Speed the Tatsugiri. Ashton is forced into his final Pokemon, a choice Specs Gholdengo who cannot protect. But Ashton's Gholdengo is incredibly bulky. The odds of my offensive Arcanine KOing his defensive Gholdengo are exactly 50%. This game will be decided on a coin flip. I've done all I can. The rest is out of my control. I hold my breath and click Flare Blitz. Gholdengo's health drops to 0. Iron Hands finishes off Arcanine, but I still have 2 Pokemon left against Ashton's 1. Both my Pokemon are so defensive. Can they take out his Iron Hands? I use Fake Out and Pollen Puff to heal up Gothitelle safely. I try and put Iron Hands to sleep, but Ashton uses Terra Grass to block it. But now he's weak to Pollen Puff. Gothitelle survives the Wild Charge, and Psychic and Pollen Puff drop Iron Hands to red HP. Understanding he's done all he can, Ashton forfeits. And I am crowned the winner of the biggest Pokemon tournament of all time. Thank you again to Displate for sponsoring today's video, and don't forget to check out Displate using my link in the description.